Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be creating a kind of Iwagumi living art piece and I'm going to be using Terrarium stone and a planter, but before we get started I'm just going to give the stones a scrub down with some algae remover just because these have been in my aquarium before so they're a little bit green, and I'm just going to scrape the label off the little planter tray. This was about 50p or £1 or something from Wilko's, but you can get them from anywhere. And I was just going to play with like a basic layout. Now Iwagumi is not my strong point, it's not something that I've ever really done, and when I have tried it was awful, so this is just going to be very basic for now because the concept I'm not even sure if it's even going to work, so I just thought I'll do a little test run, but I wanted something that would still look pleasing, so I just had kind of 2 pieces of rock. This is just what I had lying about, so I didn't go out and buy anything for this build. As I said, I don't know if it's really going to work, so I just didn't want to put like the money into it in case it doesn't, but for now I'm just playing around with some rocks just to kind of get a basic kind of structure. A lot of these smaller rocks that are going underneath will essentially be like sacrificial rocks because I'm thinking the moss will probably grow over them, so you'll pretty much just see the top part of the rock sticking out. So it was just a little bit of playing around and just seeing what fit. As I said, Iwagumi is just not something that I'm good at. I find it a really hard aquascape to create, so this was going to be just as hard, I guess, but I kind of got something that looked okay. I had played about with it earlier, and it's always the thing, you can never recreate what you've built. I kind of took it apart for the video, then just couldn't get it right again. But this is as close as I can get to what I originally had. So once everything was in place, I just did a super glue and tissue paper method of just gluing things into place. And it's probably worth mentioning that I did glue the stone to the tray, but it kind of popped off when you lift it up, but luckily the stone's that heavy, it does kind of just stay in place, so the little stones and everything are all glued in fine and they don't move, but the big rock's just a little bit too heavy to be supported by tissue paper and super glue. So next up was the substrate, and the way that I figured I would get this to work is to mix gravel, aqua soil, sand. A lot of this is just out of old aquariums because I figured this would be quite a good growing medium for moss, because the water, I could basically fill the tray with water and it'd be almost like a false bottom, like how you would build in a terrarium, and obviously the little bit of aqua soil in there would provide some kind of nutrition for any plants and things that I used. So it doesn't look like much at the minute, probably looks a little bit odd, but this is where it's kind of the experiment, because this is the kind of growing medium. I did toy with using just aqua soil or just like a terrarium sand, but I think moss tends to grow better when there's like air. So this was kind of like a little bowl that I had in the window that I just kept throwing moss in and trimmings of Eliocaris. And it's just grown, just basically in a window, just with natural light. But it's kind of overgrowing this tiny bowl, so I figured this moss would be perfect for this build. So I went ahead and removed the moss, and I could have just stuck it down as a big chunk, but then that would be all the moss that I had gone. So I figured probably what's best to do is just cut it up and spread it out and hope that that kind of pushes it to sort of just keep growing and just sort of like reseed itself, or however moss is, I'm not really sure. So yeah, I decided in the end to just break it up and then just cut it into little pieces and just spread it across the substrate that I've created. I also had some moss in there, which I just like scraped off a tree when I was on a walk. I think it's a kind of like feather moss or something. I don't know if this will survive. The actual moss that I've cut up, I believe, is Java moss that's just come out of aquariums. But this is an actual sort of like terrestrial moss. So I've mixed some of that in there as well because it'll be nice to have a different texture and a different colour. And I'm also going to try and grow some of the Eleocharis. I think it's just like an Eleocharis parvula, although I think they've renamed it now. But it's just basically a dwarf hairgrass, which appears to be doing quite well growing immersed out of water. So I figured I'd give that a try and put some little sprigs of that around the rocks as well, again just to add some more texture and a little bit more detail, and just to break it up a little bit. So at this point the build was kind of like halfway there, but I thought before I go any further with it, I just want to see if this moss is actually going to grow and survive, because as I say, this is all a bit of an experiment. It's not something that I've done before, it's not something that I've really seen before either. So at this point I just thought, well, I will spray it down and just kind of fill the tray with a bit of water, and obviously the stones in there stop it from being waterlogged, and it still kind of allows for some, I guess, aeration essentially, and I guess maybe a place for bacteria. I guess there's going to be some kind of beneficial bacteria happening in there, and springtails probably will be added eventually. But at this point I just figured I'm just going to cover it over with some cling film. This will just give it the best possible start in sort of establishing itself and just keep that humidity high. And then I pretty much just left it for a week. I just put it in a windowsill. There's no like lighting system on it, it's just purely natural light. So then a week later I came back to it and uncovered it, and pretty much nothing had happened. It pretty much looked the same. The moss was still a little bit yellow. I think that's just because it had been like growing underneath itself, but it hadn't died, and it didn't look, or it doesn't look like it's going the wrong way. So I figured, right, okay, we'll start adding like the details and things like that to it. So it looks a bit weird at the minute. The rock's obviously really dark because it's been covered in cling film, so it's just like wet from the humidity, and these stones are dry, but these are just small broken up parts of Siriu stone that I've just been placing around the base of the rock just to add a little bit of extra detail and interest. I think ideally this would have looked better with a third rock, but as I said, I didn't buy anything for it because it was purely just an experiment. So if this works, I probably will do something a little bit more better. But yeah, this was just kind of to see if the whole thing works. But generally 2 is like it's not like a number that you go for. You go for odds, so you go for like 3, 5 or 7 when you do Iwagumis, or just like anything, just odd number looks better in aquascapes when you're using things like that, whereas this probably looked kind of odd. But I went for it anyway and I just started decorating it with little stones, little bits of broken up Siriu stone and various gravels. So this is reusing goo. Again, just kind of grading everything out just to try and make it look like this really natural, not necessarily landscape, but just if you went outside and you went, I don't know, for like a walk in a forest or something, this would be kind of what the floor would look like the wood floor or the forest floor. And that's just kind of like what it's been inspired by. So I guess you'd get things like stones and moss and grass and gravel and sand and things like that. So it was just a case of recreating those things. So this is some Hugo Kamishi fine river gravel. Again, just grading out, starting with the biggest thing, being the little Siriu stones and going smaller, and finishing it off with just a little bit of sand just to kind of tie it all in. Then next I figured that I would add some little bits of wood. So this is just like the scraps in the bottom of the bag of some Wio ancient roots, and I just thought I'd add these in as well. Again, just gives it that real sort of natural vibe and that kind of real nature finish. And I was just placing these wherever I felt that they looked good. But yeah, these are really nice detail roots. They're really nice to use in an aquarium, but they do get like a fungus on them. But I don't think that'll be too much of an issue in this little build because they're pretty much going to stay dry. I did end up super gluing the slightly bigger bits of wood in place, just so they don't like blow off or fall off or anything. So they have been kind of secured, but the ones that are just kind of scattered I've just left as they are, and if they move, they move. It's just natural how they fall, I guess. So again, it still looks a bit odd because the Siriu stone's still dark from being wet, but I'm hoping when it like lightens up, it'll look nicer. At this point, I just wasn't quite happy, so I decided to add a stone on the left and a stone on the right. And I know I mentioned about things looking odd in even numbers. That's an oxymoron. But yeah, it just kind of added more balance to it, and I think the rock on the right almost looks like an extension of the one next to it, so it kind of doesn't look like 4 rocks. And I just think it created a little bit more balance. It's still not, I'm aware that it's not sort of like Iwagumi style standard or anything like that, but I just feel like this made it look a little bit more balanced and a little bit more pleasing to the eye. And then I left it for a further week, and this is kind of where we're at with it. So the moss, I guess I covered a little bit too much of it with the gravel. But that, if this does work, will probably end up just growing over that anyway, so we'll probably lose some of that detail and stuff like that, but it does look really natural. Like, it literally does just look like the outside of a floor, and I kind of do like that look, like even in aquariums, like biotope style look. So hopefully I've inspired you to do something similar, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.